Imagine two sibling states, right? Like
Yeah.
Iowa and Wisconsin. And they are just locked in this high-stakes, multi-million-dollar corporate tug of war.
Oh, absolutely. A total cage match.
Exactly. And the prize they're fighting over is this massive, intensely power-hungry artificial intelligence data center.
Right, which everyone wants right now.
Yeah, everybody wants one. And today we are looking at a document that actually proves exactly who won, who lost, and how this single, geographic pivot shifted $20 million in just one financial quarter.
Yeah, 20 million. It's wild.
It really is. And we are pulling all of this straight from the Q1 2026 SEC Form 10Q for Alliant Energy Corporation. So that includes Interstate Power and Light in Iowa and Wisconsin Power and Light.
Yeah. And our mission for this deep dive today is really to translate this dense 30-plus page financial filing into a clear story about the modern electrical grid.
Right, because it reads like a tax manual at first glance.
Oh, 100%. But hidden inside all those regulatory disclosures and, the tax formulas, that's where you actually find the architecture of the new economy.
Yeah.
I mean, we are looking at explosive tech infrastructure growth, right?
Right.
And the sheer physical reality of trying to balance wind farms with gas plants. Plus,
Right.
even the financial ripple effects of Supreme Court decisions on international
It
trade.
covers so much ground.
Yeah.
And look, I know parsing through utility rate-making principles or like tax apportionment formulas might sound like incredibly dense financial engineering to you.
It does sound pretty dry.
Right, but you have to understand, these are the exact mechanisms dictating the future of your utility bills.
Yeah.
And, the reliability of the grid that you use every single day. If you flip a light switch or if you're just tracking the AI boom, you are living right in the consequences of this exact report.
You really are.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because looking at the top line, Alliant Energy's Q1 net income actually went up. It jumped from $213 million in Q1 2025 up to $224 million in Q1 2026.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlying reason for that jump, it involves this massive data center tug of war between the states.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how a single corporate customer can literally shift the financial gravity of a massive multi-state utility holding company. I mean, it's just one customer.
One customer doing all that.
Exactly. We are looking at a timeline where back in the third quarter of 2025, Wisconsin Power and Light had an agreement in place to host this facility.
Right, they had the contract.
They did.
Yeah.
But fast forward to the first quarter of 2026, the customer terminates that agreement and completely moves the project. They moved the entire footprint next door to Interstate Power and Light's territory in Iowa.
Wow. And just reading the technical specifications on this isn't just a large factory we're talking about.
No.
This single electric service agreement outlines a contracted peak demand of about 370 megawatts. I mean, integrating a hyperscale data center of that size, that requires a completely different tier of grid architecture.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about dedicated high-voltage interconnects, custom substations, basically base load provisioning that fundamentally alters the local grid.
Right. But the crazy thing is, the immediate financial impact detailed in this Q1 report, it isn't even about selling them the electricity yet.
No, the facility isn't even built.
Exactly. It's purely about the corporate tax math. It's like two sibling states arm wrestling for this giant prize, and the tax codes are the actual referee.
Yeah, because that geographic border crossing completely rewrote Alliant's state income tax apportionment.
Oh, explain that. How does that apportionment work?
So for a holding company operating across multiple states, state income tax isn't just, a flat rate applied to all their revenue.
Okay.
It's determined by an apportionment formula. And that formula usually weighs three main factors. It looks at the proportion of the company's total physical property, its total payroll, and its total sales within that specific state.
Oh, I see. So by dropping a massive 370 megawatt anchor into Iowa instead of Wisconsin, the whole formula shifts.
Dramatically. All that projected physical infrastructure, the substations, the transmission upgrades, all of it moves right into the Iowa column.
And what did that actually do to the bottom line?
Well, because of the structural differences in how Iowa and Wisconsin calculate those corporate tax rates, increasing the Iowa apportionment while shrinking Wisconsin's resulted in this highly favorable tax outcome.
Which is where that extra cash came from.
Exactly. The report shows a $12 million reduction to their income tax expense.
Wow.
Yeah, and that basically boosted their non-utility net income by $20 million for the quarter, just from moving a future project across an invisible state line.
That is wild. But wait, let me push back on this a bit, because looking at this critically, if a single tech customer can sway a massive utilities corporate tax bill that significantly, what happens if this data center company suddenly changes its mind again? Or, what if the AI bubble pops and they go bust in 3 years?
Yeah, that is the multi-billion-dollar question. And the term for that in utility planning is stranded asset risk.
Stranded asset risk.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. When you bring 370 megawatts of new demand onto the system, you can't just rely on existing power plants. You have to build new generation.
We need way more juice.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And that capital deployment takes years of lead time and billions of dollars. If that tech company just disappears, that capital cost still has to be recovered somehow.
And let me guess, that usually falls on the regular people paying their electric bills.
Historically, yes. That burden falls right onto the everyday ratepayer.
Ouch. And, we're talking about the theoretical commitment of capital, but the physical reality in this 10Q is just staggering.
It really is.
Alliant is scrambling to build the physical generation capacity to meet this load. The report lists massive projects. They're doing a 1,000 megawatt wind generation project in Iowa.
Capped at $3,020 per kilowatt. Yeah.
Right, and an expansion of the Riverside Energy Center in Wisconsin. But then there's this one piece that really stands out. They filed an application for a 720 megawatt simple cycle natural gas plant in Lynn County, Iowa.
Yep, a massive gas plant.
Wait a minute, though. If the whole world, and this utility specifically, is transitioning to green energy, why is Alliant building a massive 720 megawatt fossil fuel gas plant? That seems totally backward.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive. But it comes down to the actual physics of the grid, specifically grid inertia and what data centers actually need.
Okay, break that down for me.
So we know they're adding a ton of wind power, right? But wind generation is asynchronous, and it's inherently intermittent. The wind stops blowing, the power drops.
Right, you can't control the weather.
Exactly. A hyperscale data center, on the other hand, requires 247 always-on reliability. I mean, even a microsecond deviation in grid frequency or voltage can corrupt their computing processes.
Oh, wow. So they need absolute stability.
Total stability. So as Alliant injects 1,000 megawatts of intermittent wind into the grid, they're actually degrading the system's mechanical inertia. They need physical spinning mass to stabilize the frequency.
Which is why they specified a simple cycle gas plant rather than like a more efficient combined cycle plant.
Yes, exactly.
Because, if I remember correctly, a simple cycle turbine is basically just a stationary jet engine, right?
That is the perfect way to describe it. It doesn't capture its own exhaust heat to run a secondary steam turbine, so it's less efficient overall. But crucially, it can synchronize to the grid and ramp up to full power in just minutes.
It's the ultimate backup generator.
Precisely. It's dispatchable peaking capacity. If the wind across Iowa suddenly dies at 2:20 a.m., that simple cycle turbine spins up almost instantly to catch the load. It's the physical insurance policy that makes the renewable energy possible.
That makes so much sense. But man, the financial engineering required to build all that infrastructure without just destroying the company's balance sheet must be intense.
Oh, it's a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
But the 10Q details how Alliant is handling it. They went to the Iowa Utilities Commission to secure what are called advance rate-making principles for that wind project.
Advance rate making. So they're sorting out the bill before they even order the food.
Exactly. It strips the uncertainty out of the process. Under traditional rate making, a utility builds a plant, hopes it stays on budget, and then years later asks the commission if they can charge ratepayers for it.
Which is super risky.
Very risky. But with advanced rate making, they locked in the financial math before a single shovel hits the dirt. The Iowa Commission approved a hard cost cap of $3,020 per kilowatt.
So if you're a ratepayer in Iowa, that's your safety net. If construction costs explode because of inflation or, say, supply chain issues, the utility shareholders have to eat the overage, not you.
Exactly right. And the commission also authorized a blended return on equity, or ROE, which secures financial predictability for the investors.
Great, because when they raise $1 billion, they use a mix of cheaper debt-like bonds and more expensive equity from shareholders.
Yep. And that blended ROE guarantees the utility a specific percentage return on the equity portion, which proves to Wall Street that the project is financially viable.
Okay, so they have these incredibly precise long-term financial models locked in. But then all that sophisticated math gets thrown out the window the second Mother Nature decides to act up.
Oh, always. Weather is the ultimate unhedgeable variable.
Right. And looking at their operational results, Q1 2026 was an exceptionally mild winter.
It was. And that mild weather dropped retail electric sales volumes by about 1% year over year, and retail gas sales dropped by 6%.
And when you look at the income statement, that tiny 1% drop in electric volume wiped out $10 million in operating income.
Hmm.
And the 6% drop in gas volume wiped out another $6 million. I mean, a 1% shift shouldn't crater your margins that aggressively, should it?
It shouldn't, but it reveals a massive structural flaw in traditional utility billing. It's known as the fixed variable mismatch.
The fixed variable mismatch. Okay, what is that?
Think about it. The vast majority of utilities costs are fixed. The physical poles, the high voltage wires, substation maintenance, labor contracts, those expenses don't drop just because you use less electricity.
Right, the pole still costs the same to maintain whether I turn my lights on or not.
Exactly. But they recover those fixed costs through volumetric billing. They charge you cents per kilowatt hour.
Oh, I see. So when it's a mild winter and everyone turns down their thermostats, the utilities revenue absolutely plummets, but their massive fixed infrastructure costs don't change at all.
Not one bit. It's a straight deduction from their operating margin.
That is a brutal business model.
It really is.
Yeah.
And while weather is unpredictable, macroeconomic policy is proving to be just as volatile.
Yes. And here's where it gets really interesting. In February 2026, the Supreme Court issued a ruling on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA.
Right, the tariff ruling.
Exactly. Because the court struck down certain presidential tariff authorities, Alliant Energy realized they might actually be eligible for millions of dollars in refunds for tariffs they already paid on imported solar materials.
Which is huge, because for years, the federal government used those emergency powers to put heavy import duties on foreign solar components, basically to protect domestic manufacturing.
Right, and utilities like Alliant were forced to just absorb those inflated costs to meet their renewable energy targets.
Exactly.
So now, with those specific powers struck down, the tariffs are retroactively questionable. But the accounting treatment here is fascinating. It's like finding a winning lottery ticket, but the lotto office is closed indefinitely.
That's a great analogy.
Alliant is basically saying, we aren't counting this money until the check clears. They are not recognizing any of this potential refund on their balance sheet.
Yeah, and that's just strict adherence to GAAP generally accepted accounting principles. You cannot record an anticipated financial gain until it is virtually certain.
And dealing with federal refunds through Customs and Border Protection is anything but certain.
Exactly. Following a Supreme Court mandate, the bureaucracy is incredibly complex. The auditors determine that getting a check anytime soon is just not highly probable.
Wow. So they are beholden to unpredictable weather, frozen federal refunds, and tech companies forcing them to build billion-dollar infrastructure. How does a company with over $11 billion in long-term debt protect itself against all these massive risks?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, analyzing utility accounting is essentially the management of contingencies. They can't eliminate the risks, so they build financial safety nets to contractually transfer them.
Like the financial guarantees buried deep in the footnotes of this report.
Oh, the footnotes are where the real story is.
Let's go back to those new data centers. The tech customers need massive transmission upgrades. Well, the footnotes reveal that if those projects get terminated before the infrastructure is finished, IPL and WPL are legally bound to reimburse the transmission providers.
And the exposure there is staggering.
It is $163 million for Interstate Power and Light and $75 million for Wisconsin Power and Light.
That's almost $240 million in contingent liability just sitting completely off the balance sheet.
It's terrifying.
It gets better. They also have indemnifications tied to transferring renewable tax credits. When they sell solar or wind tax credits to other corporations for cash, they underwrite the tax compliance risk.
Meaning, if the IRS audits that sale 3 years from now and says, nope, those credits were invalid, Alliant has to make the buyer whole.
Yep. For hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But honestly, out of all these safety nets, it's the legacy ghosts that I find the most fascinating.
Oh, the Whiting Petroleum Guarantee?
Exactly.
This one blew my mind. So back in 2004, over 20 years ago, Alliant sold off its remaining interest in an oil and gas company called Whiting Petroleum.
Right. Long gone.
Right. But this Q1 2026 report shows they are still carrying a guarantee for that company. If the current operators fail to clean up and abandon these old oil and gas facilities properly, Alliant could be forced to step in and cover an estimated $92 million.
Yep. In the energy sector, that's called an asset retirement obligation. The environmental cleanup liability often trails the original owner for decades through these indemnification agreements.
But they don't actually log that $92 million dollars or the $240 million in transmission liabilities as hard debt, right?
No, they don't. And that's where the risk management teams earn their money. Through rigorous probability modeling, they've classified the likelihood of actually having to pay out on these doomsday scenarios as remote.
Just a remote possibility.
Right. Unless the triggering event becomes probable, it just stays as a footnote. Because maintaining a healthy balance sheet requires them to constantly calculate the exact probability of disaster. They have to keep their investment-grade credit rating so they can borrow the next $1 billion.
It's a massive juggling act. So what does this all mean? I mean, we started this deep dive looking at a dense 30-page quarterly report. But what we found is that a utility company is no longer just about reading meters or burning coal, right? It's basically a front row seat to the modern economy.
It really is. The utility is at the center of everything.
Yeah. It shows how the insatiable appetite of these tech companies for data centers is literally reshaping state tax revenues. It's prompting the construction of massive new wind and gas plants, and it's forcing utilities to underwrite hundreds of millions of dollars in invisible risk.
And, it leaves us with something really important to mull over.
What's that?
We've seen how a single tech company moving its planned data center across state lines dramatically shifted this entire financial quarter for Alliant.
Millions of dollars just from moving across the border.
Exactly. So as this artificial intelligence boom just continues to accelerate, and these data centers require even more power, we're talking gigawatt scale power, will we see states start fundamentally altering their own environmental regulations and their tax codes just to win the bid for the next mega facility?
Oh, a regulatory race to the bottom.
Precisely. You really have to ask yourself, in the future, is the tech industry going to adapt to the limitations of the power grid, or is the power grid and the states that govern it going to be completely reshaped by the tech industry?
That is an incredibly high-stakes dynamic to watch unfold. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.